It was nearly the ideal murder. At first sight, Martin MacNeill appears to be living the dream. He is a distinguished doctor, a Mormon church leader, the proud spouse of a gorgeous woman, and the father of a large, loving family. But it's all a ruse. Nothing about Martin is what it appears. Similar to the film Catch Me If You Can, but with more lies, murder, and lunacy. Let us review. Hello and welcome to True Crime Recaps. My name is Chris. I just wanted to thank you for allowing us to bring you all the crime in half the time every week. Every thumbs up or share of our channel with a friend keeps us continuing, and we are eternally grateful. Thank you once more for your help. Now for the recap. Michelle MacNeill spent her final days blinded by bandages over her eyes, high on a mixture to the powerful prescription pain relievers. The former beauty queen had just left the hospital after receiving a facelift that she hoped would rescue her marriage. Michelle was still stunning at the age of 50. She was opposed to the procedure. Martin, her spouse, had suggested it. He told her to think of it as a gift for her 50th birthday. What do you gift for the woman who has it all? Michelle and Martin MacNeill's lives was picture perfect. They'd been married for 29 years and had 8 children, 4 biological and 4 adopted. Martin was a bishop, a pillar of the Mormon Church, and the money he earned as a successful doctor enabled the family to reside in a beautiful home in an elite gated neighborhood in Pleasant Grove, Utah. Life was good before it became bad. Alexis MacNeill, 22, was studying to be a doctor like her father, but she was home in Pleasant Grove for spring vacation on April 10, 2007. It wasn't the calm study break she had hoped for. She'd been her mother's nurse for a week since the surgery, but spring break had come to an end. It was time to make the 5-hour journey back to Nevada and medical school. Alexis had classes to attend, but she couldn't shake the strange feeling that something wasn't right. Martin returned to work the day after Alexis returned to school, then picked up his youngest daughter, 6-year-old Ada, from school. Martin told Ada to go find Mommy when they got home. The small girl rushed through the house screaming, "Mommy, Mommy, Mommy," as he went to the kitchen. The only response she received was silence. Ada dashed into her parents' bedroom, but Michelle was nowhere to be found. Perhaps she was in the restroom. Ada pushed open the door to a place that would haunt her for the rest of her life in that enthusiastic, no-knocking way that kids do. Michelle lay face down in a tub of reddish-brown water, fully clothed. Ada cried out for her father. Martin instructed her to go find a neighbor to assist him in getting Michelle out of the bathtub. Then, in a peculiar series of 911 calls, he either hung up on the operator or screamed angrily.
Okay, what's the problem, sir? Please, medical. Sir, what's wrong? I'm falling in the bathtub. Who's in the bathtub? Who's in the bathtub? My wife. Okay, is she conscious? She is unconscious. She's underwater. Sir. Okay, do you know how to do CPR? I'm doing it. Okay, do not hit.
I'm a physician. I've initiated CP before hanging up on her again. The operator retained the calls for years to use in training sessions with new dispatchers because they were so strange. Martin's son Damien and Damien's girlfriend Aileen came shortly after Martin and arrived home. Martin suspected his wife had overdosed on her medication and collapsed in the bathroom. He couldn't bear looking at the bottle, so he asked Aileen to flush the pills and dispose of the bottles. Michelle died after a heart attack, according to the medical examiner. According to the police reports, the death was accidental due to natural causes. Alexis was among the last to learn of her mother's death. With a knot in her chest, she rushed home to Utah. She couldn't get rid of the sense that her father had murdered her mother. Michelle Summers was a prominent California beauty queen and part-time model. Growing up, her 2 favorite things were family and God. She couldn't wait to have her own family at the age of 21. She met the guy of her dreams, 22-year-old Martin MacNeill, at a young Mormon singles gathering. But when she brought him home to meet the family, she didn't get the enthusiastic welcome she expected. Martin's arrogant demeanor did not go well with her family. There was something about the guy that bothered them. They didn't want their lovely daughter to be around him. Michelle's parents' disapproval, like Romeo and Juliet's, just made a connection with Martin more desired. He wasn't the creepy narcissist they suspected. Michelle, on the other hand, saw him as an ambitious go-getter healing from a difficult childhood. Michelle consented to marry him after he placed a gun to his head and threatened to end it all if she ever left him. They went away and married in secret in 1978. The honeymoon period was brief. While Martin was in prison, Michelle spent the first 6 months of their marriage alone. He falsified $35,000 in checks and went on a weird spending binge before meeting his new spouse. Aside from jewelry and apparel, he purchased a grandfather clock, 60 pairs of socks, a refrigerator, and, most bizarrely, a year's supply of chocolate-covered cherries. What made him do it? Mountain climbers climbed Everest for similar reasons. He wanted to see if he could. He got the idea after viewing a 60 Minutes episode about forging checks. Martin believed he could perform better. Martin MacNeill's deception did not begin with the faulty checks. He fabricated almost every aspect of his life. His strongest suit was deception. It's difficult to say how far back the lies go. Martin MacNeill and his 4 siblings grew up in Camden, New Jersey, dirt poor. Some believe he tried to kill his mother as a child, but aid arrived before he could. Others claim Martin's first successful murder was his brother's suicide. We do know that when he was 17, he lied about his age in order to join the army. He decided it didn't suit him after 2 years and lied to get out. He was released in 1975 after claiming insanity and hearing voices. Every month, the army handed him a disability check, which he used to pay for education. Despite his lowly beginnings, Martin had high dreams. Some guys learnt to play the guitar and formed a band in order to attract women. Martin MacNeill imagined all the money and beautiful ladies he could have if he were a doctor. Yes, that was his chosen profession. There was also the problem of his or academic performance. The truth had never stopped him before, and he wasn't going to limit himself now just because his grades were less than great. He used a forged transcript to apply to a medical school in Mexico. After 6 months, he used another forged transcript to get admission to a medical school in California. It worked perfectly. He decided he wanted a law degree after seeing how many gorgeous ladies lawyers were attracting, but he didn't get it honestly. He cheated his way through BYU Law School while working at the Brigham Young University Clinic. Truth is far weirder than fiction in this scenario. Martin MacNeill practiced osteopathic medicine for years despite facing major criminal allegations at every turn. After being busted for fraud in 1990, he was barred from charging Medicaid for 12 years. Accusations of sexual assault, misbehavior, and simply being a terrible doctor led to his dismissal from BYU Health Center in 1998. But that didn't deter the imposter doctor. While Martin appeared to be in control on the surface, you didn't have to look far to notice the edges fraying. For starters, there were suicide threats. Perhaps that was Martin's way of asking for assistance, but his timing was very coincidental. When he was found doing something wrong, he threatened to commit suicide. Take a look at this. Martin threatened to kill Michelle and himself with a butcher knife in 2000, the same year he was hired at the Utah Developmental Center. Michelle allegedly saw him online watching porn. Damien, his 14-year-old son, had to wrestle the knife from his grasp. Martin was caught with more porn 5 years later and vowed to kill himself again. Pornography was just the tip of the iceberg. Martin had a large number of other women on the side. 2 of them would turn out to be more than just flings. Gypsy Willis and Anna Osborne. Anna was the owner of a laser hair removal clinic. Martin met her in 2005 while he was working as a consultant. Martin volunteered his services as a liaison between Anna and her husband during her ugly divorce. After all, he was a lawyer. Their friendship immediately became sexual, and Martin didn't hold back during pillow chat. He boasted about how simple it was to kill someone with the correct combination of medicines, and how no one would ever know. It would appear quite natural, like a heart attack. He volunteered to kill her spouse on her behalf, but she assumed he was joking. At the very least, she hoped so. If Anna was a passing fancy, Gypsy Willis was Martin's true love. In November of 2005, they met online. He slipped into her DMs and introduced himself as a doctor and a lawyer. He felt he could manage his girlfriends and family without anyone noticing, but he was mistaken. Michelle had her doubts. Michelle searched through his phone records in February 2007. Martin was acting strangely, unusually so, and she wanted to know who he'd been phoning. Gypsy's name and phone number kept appearing. When Michelle confronted him about the affair, he pledged to end it, but only if Michelle agreed to perform some self-improvement as well. Martin was preoccupied with his physical appearance. He was a frequent visitor to the tanning salon, and he wanted Michelle to have a facelift to make her look younger. She was initially apprehensive. It was far too late. She wanted to decrease her blood pressure first if she was going under the knife. But she should prepare a little more. Martin was adamant. She would be all right. There was nothing to be concerned about. I'm a doctor, after all. Michelle hesitantly consented, believing that the facelift would benefit their marriage. They met with the surgeon who would be performing Michelle's operation. Martin drew the doctor away before she passed out and handed him a laundry list of pills to prescribe. Martin stated that he would be responsible for Michelle's care during her rehabilitation. His medical history did not raise any red flags. The operation went well. The doctor prepared prescriptions for Valium, Ambien, Phenergan, Percocet, and Lortab exactly as Martin requested. They should never be taken together, but the doctor assumed Martin would be in control of the medications, so there was no need to worry. Martin welcomed Michelle home from the hospital on April 3, 2007. She was high on drugs. Bandages were wrapped around her eyes. He had murder weapons in his pocket and another con planned. Alexis had returned home for spring vacation and remembered her mother looking awful. She tried to help right away, but Martin pushed her out of the room, insisting on looking after his wife. Alexis discovered her mother in a zombie-like state the next morning. Martin revealed to her that he may have given her too many medications. He claimed Michelle puked up the first dose and that he had to give her more. Alexis, shocked that her doctor father would shove pain relievers down her mother's throat, told her father that she would handle her mother's medication. Noun. Michelle asked to feel each pill before Alexis gave them to her in private. She couldn't see anything, but she'd be able to distinguish which pills were which by their distinctive marks. She didn't have faith in Martin. She had a feeling he was up to something. Michelle drew Alexis close and murmured, "If anything happens to me, make sure it's not your father." Michelle's appearance improved over time. Alexis was relieved to be leaving her and returning to medical school. They talked for the last time about F:45 a.m. When Alexis questioned her mother how her father was treating her, she cheerfully replied that Martin was nice and loving. There was nothing to be concerned about. Michelle died hours later. On the afternoon of April 11, 2007, Alexis received an unusual message from her father. He stated that Michelle was not getting out of bed and requested that Alexis contact her. Martin answered the phone when she called. He said, "Your mother is in the tub. She isn't moving." I called an ambulance and then hung up. Alexis's initial thought was to count her mother's medication. She knew how many pills she had, how many she should be taking, and how many were left. Unfortunately for Alexis, Damien's girlfriend flushed the tablets before she could. Michelle's death was ruled an accident by the authorities. Alexis had more sinister concerns. She told her older sister Rachel, but neither of them could believe their father would murder their sweet and loving mother. Martin MacNeill lived to push the boundaries. He enjoyed seeing how much he could get away with. But when he urged his daughters to go to church and pray to God for a nanny to watch the kids, he went too far. They had only buried their mother 3 days before, but they went to the Mormon temple to pray for a nanny, as their father had requested. As they were about to leave, a woman they'd never met approached and introduced herself. Martin assumed he was meeting her for the first time, but in reality he was extremely familiar with her. It had to be his mistress, Gypsy. She introduced herself as Gillian, but Alexis was no fool. Gypsy Willis was Gillian's alter ego. Martin ignored Alexis' warnings not to bring Gypsy into their house. Martin's mistress moved in less than a month later. She didn't appear to be a nanny. She neglected the children. She failed to tidy the house. She didn't know how to cook, and she slept with Martin every night. Rachel and Alexis were curious as to what this woman had done. Martin responded by threatening to kick them out of the house if they weren't kind to the new nanny. That was perfectly all right with them. Any doubts they had about their father's abilities had vanished. The daughters worked with their mother's sister to urge the police to look into Michelle's death. Meanwhile, Martin devised another con. Gypsy owed hundreds of dollars. Martin had an idea. If she changed her identity, her creditors would never locate her. And he also had a clean identity to give. Giselle, his 16-year-old adopted daughter. Martin returned her to her biological family in Ukraine so that his lover could steal her name and social security number. He informed Giselle that she would only be gone for the summer. He never responded to her. Back in Utah, Martin was working hard to locate new homes for her 3 other adopted sisters. Jill, her cousin, came to find her after almost a year. Jill discovered Giselle living in abject poverty with her birth family when she arrived. Gypsy was living the good life in the United States under Giselle's guise. Martin even changed his will, leaving her everything and his children only $1 each. He'd sometimes say that the new Giselle MacNeill was his wife. He'd say she was his daughter at times. Martin and Gypsy's bogus identity scheme fell apart when Jill brought the real Giselle home from Ukraine. In 2009, they both pled guilty to federal crimes and served time in different prisons. While Martin was imprisoned, his daughters made progress in establishing he was to blame for their mother's death. Michelle's toxicological report will be reviewed by the chief medical examiner. While none of the medications in her system were poisonous, the combination could easily have killed her. Michelle would not have been able to take the pills herself. According to the examiner, investigators probed further into Martin's past and swiftly discovered his web of deception. His entire career was built on forgeries. Worse, Martin was still receiving disability payments for his brief military service. Everything was due to his silver tongue. Martin completed his term for forgery, fraud, and identity theft in July 2012. He undoubtedly wished to restart his career, perhaps as an astronaut or nuclear physicist. Who knows what else his mind could conjure up, but he never had the opportunity to deceive his way into a new beginning. He was officially charged with Michelle's murder in August 2012. Damien, sadly, was not present to rejoice with his sisters. He killed himself a few years after Michelle died. His remaining siblings testified against him. It had to be a genuinely cathartic event. They outlined his history of deception and deception. Then get this. 6 weeks after killing her mother, he began assaulting Alexis. In a separate trial, he was convicted guilty of that offence. More than 7 years after Michelle's death, her surviving family received the answers they sought. Martin had injected his wife with medications he knew would be difficult to detect. Then he left her to drown in the bathtub while he went to work to provide his alibi. It was a near-perfect murder, and if it hadn't been for his children's tenacity, he might have gotten away with it. He was convicted of murder in 2013. Martin MacNeill was found dead in his jail cell on April 9, 2017, after serving 2 years in prison. He'd finally found a situation he couldn't get out of. Gypsy, on the other hand, has never been charged with a crime other than identity theft, and she has kept a low profile since the trial. The sisters made it their duty to eradicate their father's name from their lives, both physically and metaphorically. They erased their father's name off their mother's gravestone. Alexis married and adopted 3 of her younger sisters. Her surname was also changed from MacNeill to Summers, Michelle's maiden name. "I don't want to be Dr. MacNeill," she said. "I don't want anything to do with my father. Is it possible to blame her?" That concludes your recap. Thank you for spending the day with us. If you want to get all the crime in half the time, hit the subscribe button and the bell so you never miss a story. We're here on Wednesdays, Saturdays, and Sundays, but we're not going anywhere. More recaps may be found right here, right now. Take care until the next time.